The chandeliers cast a warm amber glow across the ballroom of the Riverside Convention Center, their crystal facets catching the Atlanta evening light that filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows. Sarah Collins sat at table 7, her weathered hands wrapped around a glass of iced tea, watching the crowd of retired law enforcement officers mingle and exchange war stories. At 65, she had learned the art of invisibility, a skill that served her well both in her former life and now, in this peaceful anonymity she'd cultivated over the past 5 years. The charity event was exactly what she'd expected, a sea of grey hair, expanding waistlines, and the peculiar mix of nostalgia and embellishment that characterized gatherings of former cops. Men in ill-fitting suits swapped tales of car chases and drug busts, each story growing more heroic with every retelling. Women clustered near the buffet table, laughing at inside jokes from decades past. Sarah recognized a few faces from her 7 years with the Atlanta K-9 unit, back before everything changed. Before Bond, before MI6, before she became someone else entirely. "Sarah Collins, I'll be damned!" A booming voice shattered her quiet observation. Tom Hendricks approached, his considerable belly preceding him by a good 6 inches. He'd been a sergeant when Sarah was still a rookie handler, and retirement had not been kind to him. His face was ruddy, either from the open bar or high blood pressure. Probably both. "Didn't think I'd see you here. Thought you'd moved overseas or something." Sarah offered a polite smile, the kind that invited no further inquiry. "Just keeping a low profile, Tom. You know how it is." "Hell, I sure do." He pulled out the chair beside her without invitation, lowering himself with a grunt. His breath smelled of bourbon. "Man, those were the days, huh? You and that dog of yours. What was his name?" "Max." Right. Max. Best damned Malinois I ever saw." Tom's eyes went distant for a moment, perhaps genuinely remembering. Whatever happened to him? The question landed like a punch she'd seen coming but couldn't quite avoid. Sarah's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her glass. "He passed about 6 years ago." "Ah, hell, I'm sorry to hear that." Tom's condolence was sincere enough, even through the alcohol haze. Those K9s, they get under your skin, don't they? Partners in ways civvies can't understand. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Max had been so much more than Tom could possibly know, more than anyone in this room could comprehend. He hadn't just been her K9 partner during those 7 years in Atlanta. He'd been her lifeline through 30 years of missions that officially never happened, in places that weren't on any map, against enemies whose names would never appear in history books. More people drifted to their table as the evening progressed. Martha Yates, who'd worked dispatch. Raymond Chen, a former SWAT officer who'd lost 2 fingers in a shootout back in '98. Lisa DeMarco, whose daughter had just made detective. They all settled into the comfortable rhythm of reminiscence, that bittersweet dance between pride in what they'd done and regret for what they'd sacrificed. "Remember the Henderson case," Raymond was saying, his voice animated. "When we had that standoff in the warehouse district, 16 hours we were out there." 17, Martha corrected. "My shift ran over because of you cowboys." They laughed, and Sarah found herself smiling genuinely. These were good people, decent people who'd served their community with honor. Part of her envied them, the simplicity of their service, the clarity of their jurisdiction, the fact that their work stayed in the realm of public record. "What about you, Sarah?" Lisa leaned forward, her earrings catching the light. "You were only with us, 7 years? Then you just vanished. There were all kinds of rumors." Tom snorted. "Rumors? Please, she probably just took a cushy private security gig somewhere. Smart move, honestly. Better pay, better hours." "Actually," Sarah heard herself say, surprising even herself, "I went to work for the British government." The table went quiet for a beat. Then Tom laughed, a deep belly laugh that seemed to shake the silverware. "The British? Doing what, teaching them how real cops work?" "Something like that." Sarah felt a familiar wall rising inside her. The professional distance she'd maintained for so long. She should have kept quiet, should have nodded along with Tom's private security theory. But something about tonight, maybe it was the anniversary, the fact that it had been exactly 5 years since her official retirement from MI6, had loosened her usual caution. Raymond grinned. What, like Scotland Yard or something? MI6, actually. The silence that followed was different this time, heavier. Then Tom laughed again, louder now, and the others joined in. Even Martha, usually more perceptive, was shaking her head with amused disbelief. MI6. Tom slapped the table. You hear that? Sarah here says she worked for British intelligence. What were you? A secretary. An agent, Sarah said quietly. The laughter intensified. Lisa actually wiped tears from her eyes. Oh, honey, I don't mean to laugh, but come on. MI6? That's like James Bond stuff. Spies and international intrigue and all that movie nonsense. It's not nonsense, Sarah said, her voice still level, but with an edge now. And yes, exactly like that. Tom was really enjoying himself now, his face even redder than before. So what? You're telling us you were a spy, a secret agent. Did you have a license to kill too? He made a finger gun gesture, complete with sound effects. Pew, pew! I was Agent 07, Sarah said. The laughter stopped for precisely 2 seconds, just long enough for everyone to process what she'd said. And then it erupted tenfold. Raymond nearly fell out of his chair. Martha covered her mouth but couldn't suppress her giggles. Lisa looked at Sarah with something between pity and amusement, as if she'd just watched a confused elderly woman claim to be Cleopatra. Oh, Sarah. Tom wiped his eyes. That's good. That's really good. Agent 07. So you're telling us you're James Bond? I'm telling you I carried that designation, yes, after the original 007 retired. The original 007. Raymond was grinning ear to ear. And let me guess, you drove an Aston Martin with machine guns, had a watch that shot lasers? Actually, the watch was more for EMP pulses and encrypted communication, Sarah said, knowing even as she spoke that she was only digging the hole deeper. And I preferred the BMW, better handling in urban environments. The table roared with laughter. Other guests were looking over now, drawn by the commotion. Tom waved them over. Hey, everyone, come listen to this. Sarah here was James Bond, Agent 007. More people crowded around. A man she didn't recognize, bald, 50s, walked with a cane, peered at her with mock seriousness. Really? You were 07? Did you have a martini preference, shaken or stirred? Neither, Sarah said, her face neutral despite the heat rising in her chest. I don't drink on assignment. On assignment, someone repeated, and another wave of laughter swept the group. A woman in a purple dress grabbed her friend's arm. Oh my God, this is the best thing I've heard all night. A 65-year-old woman claiming she was a super spy. What's next? You single-handedly prevented World War III. Sarah's jaw tightened. Twice, actually. Once in 2009 and again in 2017. They howled. They actually howled with laughter. Tom was bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for air. Martha was crying again. Raymond pulled out his phone, recording the moment for posterity. Please, please, the bald man with the cane said, trying to catch his breath. Tell us more. Did you have a nemesis? Every Bond needs a good villain. Sarah looked at him steadily. Viktor Volkov, former KGB, later freelance. We engaged 14 times over the course of 20 years. He died in Prague in 2019. Prague? Tom straightened up. Of course it was Prague. Exotic location, very Bond-like. And let me guess, you killed him with your bare hands after a dramatic fight on top of a moving train. Rooftop, actually. But yes, hand to hand, he fell 6 stories into the Vltava River. They recovered the body 3 days later. Lisa shook her head, her expression a mix of concern and condescension. Sarah, honey, are you feeling all right? Is there someone we should call? Family, maybe? The question stung more than the laughter. Sarah recognized that tone. The one people use when they're worried about dementia, about mental deterioration, about a sad old woman losing her grip on reality. I'm perfectly fine, Lisa. I'm simply telling you the truth. The truth, Raymond repeated, still grinning. Right, and I'm Batman. Tom, you want to be Superman? I call Iron Man, someone shouted from the back of the crowd. The jokes continued, each one building on the last. Sarah sat motionless, her face an impassive mask that had served her through countless interrogations, negotiations, and life-threatening situations. This, somehow, felt worse than any of those. At least when facing an enemy operative, there was a certain respect, a recognition that you were dangerous, capable, real. This was different. This was erasure. Come on, Sarah, Tom said, his laughter finally subsiding into chuckles. It's a good story, I'll give you that. But seriously, what did you really do after leaving the force? Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then she stood, smoothing down her simple black dress. Exactly what I said, Tom. Every word of it. Sure, he waved dismissively. Well, it was nice seeing you, even if you've gone a little batty in your old age. She walked away from the table, her posture straight, her steps measured. Behind her, the laughter resumed, already moving on to other topics, other jokes. By the time she reached the ballroom's large windows overlooking the Chattahoochee River, she'd been reduced to an amusing anecdote. The crazy old lady who thought she was James Bond. Sarah stared out at the darkening water, seeing her reflection in the glass. An old woman looked back at her, grey hair cut short for practicality, lines around her eyes from squinting through sniper scopes and against desert sun, a small scar near her left temple from a knife fight in Cairo, hands that had disarmed bombs, picked locks, and held a dying partner on a rainy night in London when Max finally gave out after a distinguished career that no one outside MI6 would ever know about. She'd saved thousands of lives over 3 decades. She'd prevented wars, stopped bioweapons from being deployed, dismantled terrorist cells, and protected assets whose work would shape the next century of human progress. She'd been shot 4 times, stabbed twice, poisoned once, and had learned 17 languages to various degrees of fluency. She'd earned her 07 designation through blood, sweat, and more sacrifice than anyone in this room could imagine. And they thought she was senile. Sarah closed her eyes, a memory washing over her unbidden. James Bond, the original, the legend, standing in that rain-soaked training facility in Scotland. She'd been 33, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Max had been 3, already showing the exceptional intelligence that would make him the perfect field partner. They won't believe you exist, Bond had told her that day, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Even after you've saved them, especially after you've saved them. That's the price of this work, Collins. You do impossible things, and then you disappear. The world goes on, never knowing how close it came to ending. She'd accepted that truth then. She accepted it now. But knowing it and feeling it, standing here while people who'd once respected her laughed at her reality, those were different things. Ma'am? Sarah opened her eyes and turned. A young server stood nearby, looking concerned. Are you all right? Can I get you anything? She managed a smile. I'm fine, thank you. Just enjoying the view. The server nodded and moved away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the lengthening shadows on the river. In an hour, she'd leave this event and return to her modest home in Decatur. She'd feed her cat, water her garden, maybe watch some television before bed. It was a good life, a quiet life, the life she'd chosen after finally hanging up her Walther PPK for the last time. But standing here now, feeling the weight of invisibility, of being dismissed as a confused old woman when she'd once been one of the most dangerous people on the planet, Sarah Collins felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt forgotten. And in the world of intelligence, being forgotten was supposed to be the goal. It meant you'd done your job well. It meant you'd left no trace, no trail, no evidence. It meant you could finally rest. So why did it hurt so much? Behind her, the party continued. Laughter echoed. Glasses clinked. Old warriors told old stories, each one true in its own way, each one part of a public record that proved they'd existed, they'd mattered, they'd served. Sarah had no such proof. Only memories, scars, and a box of medals in her closet that bore no names, no dates, no countries, just numbers and symbols that meant nothing to anyone but her, and a handful of people in London who'd long since moved on. To other agents, other threats, other priorities. She was about to head for the exit when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Her training, buried but never truly dormant, recognized it immediately. The synchronized footfalls of multiple individuals moving with military precision, the subtle whisper of tactical fabric, the almost imperceptible click of weapons checks. Sarah's reflection in the window shifted as she caught movement behind her. Her pulse didn't quicken, another trained response, but every sense sharpened to razor focus. 3 figures had entered the ballroom, then 5, then 8, and they were all walking directly toward her. The laughter died like a candle flame snuffed between fingers. Sarah didn't turn immediately. She watched their approach in the window's reflection, her trained eyes cataloguing every detail with the automatic precision of decades in the field. 8 operatives moving in a standard protective formation, 2 advanced scouts clearing sightlines, 4 forming a perimeter box, 2 flanking what was clearly a principal asset in the center. They wore dark suits, perfectly tailored with the telltale signs Sarah had learned to recognize. Slight bulges at the hip and shoulder where weapons rested, earpieces disguised as hearing aids, shoes with reinforced toes and tactical soles masquerading as Italian leather. To the untrained eye, they looked like corporate security or perhaps secret service. But Sarah knew better. She'd worked with teams exactly like this for 30 years. MI6, Section 7, Covert Operations Division. Her heart rate remained steady. Another trained response, but something cold slid down her spine. They shouldn't be here. She'd been out for 5 years. Her clearance had been revoked, her files archived, her existence scrubbed from active rosters. The deal had been clear. Complete deniability in exchange for a quiet retirement. No contact, no callbacks, no exceptions. So why were they here? The ballroom's ambient noise, the chatter, the clinking glasses, the live jazz quartet in the corner began to fade as people noticed the newcomers. Conversations stuttered and stopped. Tom Hendricks, who'd been in the middle of another embellished story, trailed off mid-sentence. Raymond Chen's hand moved instinctively toward his hip where he'd once carried a service weapon. The lead operative was a woman in her mid-40s, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, moving with the controlled grace of a dancer or a martial artist. Sarah recognized the walk, a particular training program at the fort, the MI6 facility in Scotland, where new field agents learned to move like predators. She'd walked exactly like that once. The woman's eyes locked onto Sarah's reflection in the window. No hesitation, no scanning the room. She knew exactly who she was looking for. "Agent Collins," the woman said, her voice carrying a distinct British accent. Oxford-educated, with the clipped precision of someone who'd learned to command attention without raising volume. "It's been a long time." Sarah finally turned, her face betraying nothing. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "No confusion, ma'am." The woman stopped 3 feet away, maintaining the respectful distance of a subordinate addressing a superior. The rest of the team had formed a loose perimeter around them, their positions calculated to control the room without appearing overtly threatening. Professional, practiced, exactly how Sarah had trained countless operatives over the years. Tom Hendricks found his voice first. "Hey, what is this? Some kind of joke? Did someone hire actors?" He was trying to laugh, but it came out nervous, uncertain. The woman ignored him completely, her attention fixed on Sarah. She reached into her jacket, slowly, deliberately, giving Sarah time to see it wasn't a hostile movement, and produced a slim leather wallet. When she flipped it open, Sarah saw the familiar crest, the crowned portcullis of MI6, embossed in gold above a clearance designation she recognized immediately. Level 9, Omega Protocol. That was higher than Sarah had ever carried, even during her most active years. Whatever was happening, it wasn't routine. "My name is Director Catherine Ashford," the woman continued. I'm the current head of Section 7. We've traveled quite a long way to find you, Agent Collins. I'm not an agent, Sarah said quietly. Not anymore. I'm retired. Retirement is a privilege, not a right. Catherine's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained hard. And it can be revoked when circumstances require it. Martha Yates had pushed her way through the growing crowd, her dispatcher's instinct for de-escalation kicking in. Excuse me, but who are you people? This is a private event. One of the perimeter agents, a young man with a surgical scar above his left eyebrow, pulled out his own credentials. British intelligence, ma'am. We need you all to step back and give us some space, please. British intelligence? Raymond Chen's skepticism was palpable. In Atlanta, at a retirement party? Georgia maintains a cooperative security relationship with the United Kingdom, Catherine said, her tone suggesting this was the only explanation they'd receive. Now please, step back. But the crowd wasn't moving. If anything, more people were pressing closer, drawn by the commotion. Tom Hendrick's face had gone from ruddy to pale, his bourbon-soaked brain struggling to process what was happening. Lisa DeMarco had her phone out, recording. "Put the phone away," one of the agents said sharply. "This is America," Lisa shot back. "I have a right." The agent moved with startling speed, plucking the phone from her hand before she could finish the sentence. "National security supersedes your rights, madam. You'll get it back shortly, unharmed." The crowd erupted in protests, but Sarah barely heard them. Her attention was fixed on Catherine Ashford and the encrypted tablet the director was now pulling from a slim briefcase carried by one of her team. "Agent Collins," Catherine said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Authorization code Crimson 7 Tango. Do you confirm?" The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Crimson 7 Tango. That was her personal reactivation code, assigned the day she took the 07 designation and never changed, never reassigned. Only 3 people in the entire organization had access to it: the director of MI6, the head of Section 7, and the Prime Minister. They were using it now, which meant this wasn't a courtesy call or a ceremonial acknowledgement of past service. This was a legitimate recall to active duty. "I confirm," Sarah heard herself say, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. Catherine nodded and tapped the tablet's screen. The device lit up with Sarah's official file, the one that supposedly didn't exist anymore. Her photograph from 30 years ago appeared. Younger, harder, with Max sitting at her side, both of them staring at the camera with the intense focus of warriors ready for deployment. "Biometric confirmation required," Catherine said, extending the tablet towards Sarah. Sarah placed her right palm on the screen. The device beeped, scanning her handprint and matching it against records kept in servers buried deep beneath Thames House in London. A green light pulsed 3 times. "Confirmed," the tablet's synthetic voice announced. "Agent 007, status, reactivated." The room went dead silent. Tom Hendricks made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Raymond simply stared, all color draining from his face. Lisa had stopped reaching for her phone, frozen in place like everyone else. Catherine Ashford took a breath, and in a clear, carrying voice that reached every corner of the ballroom said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. The woman you know as Sarah Collins is indeed a decorated intelligence officer who served with distinction in Her Majesty's Secret Service for 30 years. She carried the designation 007 from 1995 until her retirement in 2020. During that time, she completed 147 classified missions across 6 continents, prevented 4 major international incidents that would have resulted in significant loss of life, and received commendations from 12 allied nations, all of which remain sealed under national security protocols. She paused, letting the information settle like snow on the stunned crowd. "Everything she told you tonight was true, every word." Tom's legs seemed to give out. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair, his face slack with shock. Around the room, Sarah watched as understanding rippled through the crowd. followed immediately by shame, embarrassment, and in some cases disbelief still clinging to the edges of their expressions. But it was Raymond who spoke first, his voice small and hoarse. "Jesus Christ, Sarah, we laughed at you." Sarah met his eyes and saw genuine remorse there, but she felt only numbness, a professional detachment that had served her through worse moments than this. "It's fine, Raymond." "It's not fine," Martha said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We mocked you. We treated you like a confused old woman," Sarah supplied gently. "It's what I expected. It's what the job requires." Catherine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a register only Sarah could hear. "Agent Collins, we have a situation, a critical one. We need your expertise immediately." "I'm 65 years old," Sarah said quietly. "Surely you have younger, faster agents who—" "None with your specific knowledge base. None who were present during Operation Nightfall." Catherine's eyes were urgent now, the professional mask cracking slightly. "The syndicate has resurfaced, Sarah, and they've brought something new, something worse." The name hit Sarah like ice water. The syndicate. The organization she'd spent the better part of 2 decades dismantling, cell by cell, operative by operative. The enemy that had cost her Max in the end, that rainy night in London when he'd taken a bullet meant for her, his last act of loyalty in a career spent saving her life dozens of times over. She'd thought they were finished, scattered, broken beyond repair. "When?" she asked. 3 weeks ago. We've been trying to contain it quietly, but the situation is escalating. We need someone who understands their operational structure, their thinking. We need the agent who broke them the first time." Sarah looked past Catherine at the crowd of former colleagues, all staring at her with new eyes. Tom Hendricks, who'd made finger guns and pew-pew sounds. Lisa DeMarco, who'd suggested someone should call Sarah's family to check on her mental health. Martha Yates, who'd laughed until she cried. They looked small now, diminished. Not because they were lesser people, but because they'd just had their understanding of reality fundamentally reordered. The woman they'd known as a fellow ex-cop, someone who'd worked K9 for 7 unremarkable years before disappearing into obscurity, was actually something else entirely. A ghost, a weapon, a guardian they'd never known they had. "There's something else," Catherine said, her voice even softer now. "Something we think will interest you." "May I?" She gestured toward the door. Sarah understood the implication. This conversation had already revealed too much in too public a setting. Whatever came next needed to happen somewhere more secure. But before Sarah could respond, one of the perimeter agents, the young man with the scar, suddenly pressed his hand to his earpiece, his body language shifting from parade rest to combat, ready in an instant. "Director," he said sharply, "we have movement outside. 3 vehicles approaching from the south entrance. Not ours." Catherine's expression went cold and hard. "Show me." The agent pulled out a tablet, showing a live feed from what must have been surveillance drones or perimeter cameras. Sarah leaned in to look, her old instincts flooding back with uncomfortable ease. 3 black SUVs approaching in formation, moving too fast to be casual traffic. "Positions," Catherine ordered crisply. Her team moved instantly, weapons appearing in hands with practiced speed, forming a protective barrier between Sarah and the ballroom entrance. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. People began backing away, stumbling over chairs and each other in their panic. "Everyone stay calm," Catherine commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Stay where you are and get down behind cover. Now." But Sarah wasn't looking at the crowd anymore. She was watching the tablet feed as the SUVs screeched to a halt outside the convention center's main entrance. Doors flew open. Figures emerged, moving with tactical precision, wearing dark combat gear and carrying weapons that definitely weren't legal for civilian possession. "How many?" Sarah asked, her voice completely calm, completely professional, as if the last 5 years of retirement had never happened. 15 confirmed, the scarred agent reported. "Possibly more in the vehicles, standard assault loadout. They're making entry now." Catherine looked at Sarah, and in that moment, They understood each other perfectly. The syndicate hadn't just resurfaced. They'd tracked Sarah down, which meant they knew about the reactivation before MI6 had even initiated it, which meant there was a leak, a serious one. "Get these people to the kitchen and service areas," Sarah said, her command voice emerging naturally. "Barricade the doors. Call local PD, but tell them to stage 2 blocks out. If they roll in hot, this becomes a massacre." Catherine didn't question the orders. She simply nodded to her team, who began efficiently but firmly herding the shocked party guests toward the back of the ballroom. Tom, Martha, Raymond, Lisa, all of them moving like stunned cattle, their earlier laughter now a distant memory. "You're not armed," Catherine said to Sarah, pulling a compact Glock from her ankle holster and offering it handle first. Sarah took the weapon, checked the chamber and magazine with muscle memory so deep it might as well have been breathing. 15 rounds. Good enough. What about backup? En route, but we're looking at 8 minutes minimum. Then we hold for 8 minutes. The sound of breaking glass echoed from the front entrance. Shouts in what Sarah's trained ear identified as Serbian and Russian. The syndicate had always been multinational, drawing from the disaffected and skilled of a dozen different intelligence services. "Sarah," Catherine's voice was urgent, "you don't have to do this. You're a civilian now. We can extract you through—" "No." Sarah chambered around, the metallic click sharp and final. "They came here for me, which means everyone in this room is in danger because of me. So no, Director. No extraction." She turned to face the ballroom entrance, where shadows were moving in the hallway beyond. 8 minutes. 8 minutes until help arrived. 8 minutes to keep 15 armed hostiles from massacring a room full of retired police officers whose only crime had been disbelieving an old woman's truth. "Besides," Sarah said, a cold smile touching her lips, "they interrupted my evening. I find that terribly rude." Catherine Ashford positioned herself at Sarah's left flank, her own weapon raised. The remaining MI6 agents formed a defensive line, weapons trained on the entrance. Behind them, the sounds of panicking civilians faded as they were herded to safety. In the sudden silence, Sarah heard footsteps, organized, professional, coming closer. Then a voice, amplified by some kind of electronic device, echoed through the halls. "Agent 007. We know you're here. Come out, and the civilians live. Resist, and everyone in this building dies." Sarah recognized that voice. She'd heard it before, years ago, in a different context. Viktor Volkov's operation in Prague. One of his lieutenants had escaped that night, a woman named Katya Volkov, Viktor's daughter. "Well," Sarah muttered, "this just got personal." The first hostile rounded the corner, and Sarah squeezed the trigger. The second act of her life as Agent 007 had begun. The firefight lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Sarah counted automatically, another ingrained habit from decades in the field, where timing could mean the difference between extraction and execution. She'd put down 3 hostiles before Atlanta PD arrived in force, their SWAT teams pouring into the convention center with the overwhelming firepower that made the remaining syndicate operatives choose retreat over suicide. Katya Volkov, if it had truly been her voice on that amplifier, vanished like smoke. By the time the building was secured, the 3 SUVs were gone, leaving behind only shell casings, blood trails, and a scene that would require a small army of federal agents to sanitize before the media got wind of what had actually happened. Now, 6 hours later, Sarah sat in a secure conference room 3 floors beneath the Atlanta FBI field office, nursing her 3rd cup of coffee and listening to Director Catherine Ashford brief a room full of people with security clearances higher than most nations' defense ministers. Operation Nightfall was supposed to end this, Catherine was saying, her voice tight with frustration. A holographic display dominated the center of the conference table, showing a web of connections, photographs and data streams that would have seemed like science fiction when Sarah first joined MI6. Agent Collins dismantled the syndicate's leadership structure in 2018. Viktor Volkov, their founder and primary strategist, was eliminated in 2019. We tracked down and neutralized 17 cell leaders across 4 continents. By all accounts, the organization was finished. But, Sarah prompted, knowing there was always a but in this line of work. Catherine tapped the display, and the web reconfigured, showing new connections forming like a cancer regrowing. But we underestimated the syndicate's resilience. More specifically, we underestimated Katya Volkov. A face appeared on the hologram. A woman in her early 40s with sharp cheekbones, ice-blue eyes, and the kind of expression that suggested she'd learned cruelty early and perfected it over time. Sarah recognized her immediately from that operation in Prague, though she looked older now, harder. Katya was 16 when you killed her father, Catherine continued. She was present that night, hidden in a safe house we didn't know about. She watched the entire confrontation through surveillance feeds, watched him fall, watched you walk away. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in her chest. Witnesses were complications. Witnesses with motivation were time bombs. She spent the next 6 years in deep cover, Catherine said, pulling up a timeline. Learning, planning, rebuilding her father's organization from the shadows. She's brilliant, Sarah. Every bit as strategic as Victor was, but with none of his ego or need for recognition. She's made the new syndicate leaner, faster, and significantly more dangerous. What's her objective? Asked a man to Sarah's right, Deputy Director Marcus Webb from the CIA's Counterterrorism Center. He'd been introduced when Sarah arrived, along with half a dozen other alphabet soup representatives who'd been read into the situation. That's where it gets interesting, Catherine said. Her tone suggesting interesting was a dramatic understatement. She pulled up a new series of images: server farms, data centers, satellite uplink facilities. For the past 2 years, Katya's been systematically infiltrating global communications infrastructure, not to steal data or commit fraud, but to plant something. We call it Chimera. A virus? Sarah asked. More sophisticated than that. Chimera is an AI-assisted intrusion system that can hibernate in network infrastructure for months or years, completely undetectable until it receives an activation signal. Once activated, it can simultaneously compromise thousands of systems. Military, civilian, financial, medical, everything connected to the internet becomes a potential weapon. Marcus whistled low. That's not terrorism. That's civilizational collapse. Precisely. Catherine's face was grim. We've identified Chimera code in 47 countries so far, including the United States, UK, China, Russia, and most of the EU. If Katya activates it, she could crash global markets, compromise nuclear command systems, shut down hospital networks, disable air traffic control, all within minutes. Sarah set down her coffee cup carefully. So, why hasn't she? Because she wants something first, said a woman across the table. Dr. Helen Reeves from GCHQ, Britain's Signals Intelligence Agency. 3 weeks ago, we intercepted a coded message from Katya to someone in the intelligence community. The decryption took us this long, but the content was clear. She wants you, Agent Collins, specifically. The room went quiet. Sarah felt every eye turned toward her. Me? Why? Catherine pulled up another image. This one a photograph taken 6 years ago. Sarah's breath caught despite her training. It showed Max, her partner, lying on that rain-soaked street in London, his blood mixing with puddles, his eyes already distant, and Sarah, kneeling beside him, her face raw with grief that she'd suppressed for so long it had become part of her skeleton. She knows what Max meant to you, Catherine said softly. She knows that operation was the beginning of the end for her father's organization. And she knows you retired shortly after Max died. In her mind, you're vulnerable now, old, out of practice. She thinks she can break you the way you broke her father. And the attack tonight? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the photograph staring at her from the hologram. A test, a message, proof that she can reach you anywhere. Catherine leaned forward. Sarah, Katya has given us 48 hours to deliver you to her. Alone. In exchange, she'll provide the deactivation codes for Chimera. Refuse, and she activates everything. Marcus shook his head. It's a trap. Obviously, we can't seriously be considering— We're not, Catherine cut him off. But we need a counter-strategy, and that requires Agent Collins' expertise. She knows the Syndicate's operational patterns better than anyone alive. She knows how Victor thought, which means she's our best chance at predicting how Katya will move. Sarah studied the holographic web, her mind already working through possibilities. Katya was smart, probably smarter than her father had been. But she was also emotionally compromised, driven by revenge rather than ideology. That created opportunities, patterns, mistakes. Where does she want the exchange to happen? Sarah asked. Catherine hesitated. Tbilisi, Georgia, the former Soviet Republic, not the state. There's an abandoned KGB facility in the mountains outside the city, the same place where Victor ran his first operations 30 years ago. It's symbolic. It's also tactically sound, Sarah observed. Remote, defensible, familiar territory for her. She'll have prepared it thoroughly. She paused, looking at Catherine directly. You said there was something else. Something you thought would interest me. What was it? Catherine glanced at the others around the table, then nodded to herself. She tapped the display again, and a new image appeared. A Malinois, young and powerful, with intelligent eyes and a tactical vest bearing MI6 insignia. This is Max the Two, Catherine said. Descended from your Max's bloodline. We've been training him for the past 3 years in advanced K9 operations. He's equipped with next-generation surveillance tech, including thermal imaging, long-range audio capture, and a neural interface that allows real-time data transmission to a handler's equipment. Sarah stared at the image, feeling something crack in the carefully maintained walls she'd built around her grief. Max's descendant, his legacy continuing the work. He's ready for field deployment, Catherine continued, and he responds exceptionally well to handlers with your training background. We thought, if you agreed to help us with this situation, he could be your partner. It was manipulation, Sarah knew. Emotional leverage designed to tip her decision, but knowing that didn't make it any less effective. She looked at that young Malinois, saw intelligence and loyalty in his posture, and felt 30 years of partnership calling to her like a ghost. What's the plan? Sarah asked quietly. Catherine straightened, recognizing acceptance when she heard it. We insert you into Tbilisi with a full support team. You make contact with Katya, keep her engaged while our people work to locate and neutralize the Chimera activation nodes. We've identified most of them, but we need time to coordinate a simultaneous strike across multiple countries. If even one node activates, the cascade effect could trigger the others. How much time do you need? 4 hours minimum from initial contact. Sarah nodded slowly. So I need to keep Katya talking for 4 hours while your teams work, in a location she's chosen and prepared, with her people surrounding us, while she wants nothing more than to watch me suffer for killing her father. Yes, Catherine said simply. I know what I'm asking, Sarah. I know you've given enough already, but there's no one else. You're the only person alive with the operational knowledge, the personal connection, and the field experience to pull this off. Marcus cleared his throat. With all due respect, Agent Collins is 65 years old. Even with her experience, can she physically handle a mission this demanding? No offense intended. Sarah looked at him with the flat, emotionless gaze that had made interrogation subjects confess just to escape her attention. I completed a full tactical assessment last year as part of my retirement benefits package. I qualified expert in small arms, maintained a 7-minute mile, and scored in the 95th percentile for my age group in hand-to-hand combat. I may be old, Deputy Director Webb, but I'm not fragile. Marcus had the grace to look embarrassed. None taken. I mean, point made. Dr. Reeves spoke up, her tone analytical. The neural interface with Max the Two will require a calibration period. At least 48 hours of intensive training to establish the handler K9 connection at operational level. That's cutting it extremely close to Katya's deadline. Then we start immediately, Sarah said, standing. Where is he? Catherine smiled, the first genuine expression Sarah had seen from her. Waiting outside, actually. We were optimistic about your decision. She led Sarah out of the conference room, down a corridor lined with security checkpoints, and into what appeared to be a training facility adapted from an old warehouse space. Equipment lined the walls, obstacle courses, tactical scenarios, everything needed to prepare operatives for the field. And in the center of the room, sitting at perfect attention, beside a handler in MI6 tactical gear, was Max Thecken. He was magnificent, slightly larger than the original Max, with the same intelligent eyes, the same alertness in every line of his body. His tactical vest was sleek, clearly containing technology that hadn't existed when Sarah was active. As she approached, his ears perked forward, and he watched her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. "Max," she said softly, using the command voice she hadn't employed in 6 years. "Higher." The Dutch command for "come here," the language she'd trained the original Max in, reducing confusion with English commands that might be overheard in the field. Max Thecken stood and walked to her, his gait confident and controlled. He stopped precisely 2 feet away, sitting again, waiting for further instruction. But his eyes never left her face, and Sarah saw something there that transcended training. Recognition, perhaps, or maybe just the genetic memory of countless generations of working dogs who'd learned to trust and follow humans who spoke with authority and moved with purpose. Sarah knelt slowly, her joints protesting slightly, and extended her hand. Max, too, sniffed it carefully, then, in a gesture that nearly broke her composure, pressed his head against her palm, accepting her. "Hello, Max," she whispered. "Your predecessor would be proud of you." The handler, a young man in his late 20s, approached cautiously. "He's never done that before, ma'am. Accepted someone so quickly. Usually takes days to build that level of trust." "His great-great-grandfather knew me," Sarah said, scratching behind Max Thecken's ears in the exact spot where the original Max had loved it. "Maybe there's something in the bloodline that remembers." Catherine joined them, holding a tablet. "The neural interface requires a dermal patch behind your ear. It's completely non-invasive, but it'll take some getting used to. You'll receive real-time data from Max's sensors, visual, audio, biometric. It creates a partnership that's closer than anything you experienced with the original Max." Sarah looked up at her. "Will it hurt him?" "No. The technology is designed to enhance the natural bond between handler and K9, not replace it. He's still a dog, still capable of independent action. But you'll know what he knows, in a way that's difficult to describe until you experience it." Sarah stood, feeling Max II's presence at her side like an extension of her own awareness. "Then let's get started. We have 48 hours to become a team capable of facing down an enemy who's had 6 years to prepare for this moment." Catherine nodded. "Your gear is being prepared now. We've updated your old loadout with current tech, weapons, communications, defensive equipment. You'll leave for Tbilisi in 36 hours. What about my cover story? Katya will be suspicious if I just show up. We're working on that. The official story will be that you've agreed to negotiate, to hear her out, that you're old, tired, and possibly willing to provide information about MI6 operations in exchange for your own safety. Make her think she's broken you." Sarah smiled without humor. "Make her think grief and age have made me weak." "Exactly. And when the 4 hours are up, when your teams have neutralized Chimera?" Catherine's expression went cold. "Then you do what you do best, Agent 07. You remove the threat permanently." Sarah looked down at Max Thecken, who gazed back at her with absolute trust. She thought about the original Max, about that rainy night in London, about the promise she'd made over his grave that she'd never put another partner in danger like that again. But the world needed protecting. It always had. And some promises she was learning couldn't be kept when the alternative was letting everything burn. "All right," Sarah said quietly. "Let's go to work." The young handler attached the dermal patch behind Sarah's ear, a small flesh-colored disc that warmed slightly as it activated. For a moment, Nothing happened. Then, Sarah gasped as her awareness suddenly expanded. She could feel Max the Two's heartbeat, steady and strong, could sense his alertness, his readiness. When he looked to the left, she knew it instantly, the information flowing into her consciousness like it had always been there. It was intimate, profound, a partnership deeper than words. "Max," she said aloud, "vorite, forward." Max the Two moved instantly, and Sarah moved with him, their steps synchronized, as if they'd been working together for years instead of minutes. Around the training facility, past obstacles, through doorways, every movement fluid, instinctive, right. Catherine watched with satisfaction. It usually takes days to achieve that level of synchronization. Sarah barely heard her. She was too busy discovering what it meant to be truly partnered with someone who would follow her into hell without hesitation, just as his predecessor had done a lifetime ago. Outside, night was giving way to dawn. In 36 hours, she'd be on a plane to Tbilisi. In 48 hours, she'd be face to face with Katya Volkov, the woman who'd spent 6 years planning her revenge. But right now, in this moment, Sarah Collins wasn't a 65-year-old retiree or a dismissed old woman who people laughed at. She was Agent 007, and she had work to do. The Caucasus Mountains rose like jagged teeth against the Georgian sky, their peaks still dusted with early snow despite the autumn warmth in the valleys below. Sarah watched them through the helicopter's window, feeling the familiar pre-mission focus settling over her like an old coat. 36 hours of intensive training with Max the Two had compressed into what felt like 36 minutes, and now they were here, descending toward a landing zone 3 kilometers from the abandoned KGB facility where Katya Volkov waited. Max II sat beside her in the cargo bay, his tactical vest humming softly with active surveillance systems. Through the neural link, Sarah felt his calm alertness, the kind of controlled readiness that came from excellent training and good breeding. He was watching the mountains too, his enhanced sensors already mapping terrain and identifying potential threats. 2 minutes to LZ, the pilot announced through the comm system. Catherine Ashford's voice crackled in Sarah's earpiece. "Final check, Agent Collins. How are you feeling?" Sarah ran through her mental checklist automatically. Walter PPK secured at her hip, backup Glock at her ankle, tactical knife in her boot, 3 spare magazines, flashbang grenades, field medical kit, encrypted communications device linked to MI6 command. Everything where it should be. "Ready," she said simply. "Remember, we need 4 hours from initial contact. The strike teams are positioned at all 17 Chimera nodes across 11 countries. Simultaneous neutralization is critical. If Katya suspects we're moving against her infrastructure, she'll activate everything immediately." "Understood. I'll keep her talking." "And Sarah?" Catherine's voice softened slightly. "If it goes wrong, if she activates Chimera despite everything, the extraction team has orders to pull you out regardless of mission status. You've given enough. We're not losing you too." Sarah didn't respond to that. They both knew extraction was theoretical. If Chimera activated, the chaos would make any rescue operation impossible. This mission had always been one way, until those nodes were neutralized. The helicopter touched down in a clearing surrounded by dense pine forest. Sarah and Max II disembarked quickly, dropping into a tactical crouch as the aircraft lifted off immediately, its rotors fading into the distance. Silence settled over the forest, broken only by wind through the trees and the distant cry of a raptor hunting in the valleys below. Through the neural link, Sarah felt Max II's sensory input layering over her own awareness. His hearing picked up sounds she'd have missed. Small animals in the underbrush, the mechanical hum of surveillance equipment hidden in the trees, the faint vibration of generators somewhere to the north. "Katya knows we're here," Sarah murmured, stroking Max II's head once before standing. "Let's not keep her waiting." They moved through the forest with practiced efficiency. Sarah's body remembered the rhythm of fieldwork despite 5 years away. How to step silently, how to use terrain for concealment, how to read the environment for threats. Max Asset ranged ahead, his sensors feeding her information about heat signatures, tripwires, and concealed cameras. The KGB facility emerged from the trees like a concrete tumor. 3 stories of Soviet-era brutalist architecture, weathered by decades and deliberately kept in disrepair to avoid attracting attention. But Sarah's trained eye caught the subtle signs of recent activity: fresh tire tracks in the dirt, modern security cameras disguised as old fixtures, the shimmer of nearly invisible laser detection grids. "I count 16 hostiles," Catherine's voice said in her ear. "Thermal imaging shows most concentrated in the central building, 2nd floor. Katya's likely in the old command center. It's the most defensible position." Sarah circled the facility slowly, using Max 2's sensors to build a complete tactical picture. The syndicate operatives were good, well-positioned, professionally equipped, maintaining proper security rotations. But they were also predictable, following standard protective protocols that Sarah had spent 30 years learning to exploit. "There!" she whispered, identifying a blind spot in the camera coverage near the eastern entrance. "Max! Volg! Follow!" They approached the entrance using shadows and timing, slipping past guard rotations with the kind of precision that made the difference between mission success and body bags. The door was locked but not alarmed, arrogant of Katya, assuming no one could reach it undetected. Sarah picked the lock in 45 seconds, a skill she'd maintained through retirement by practicing on progressively complex mechanisms. The door opened silently on recently oiled hinges. Inside, the facility was a study in contrasts. The exterior suggested abandonment, but the interior had been transformed into a modern tactical operations center. Computer servers hummed in climate-controlled rooms. LED lighting replaced the old fluorescents. Armed personnel moved with military precision through corridors that had once housed Soviet intelligence officers planning operations against the West. Sarah and Max II moved like ghosts through the building, using the blueprints Catherine had provided to navigate toward the command center. Twice they encountered patrols. Twice they avoided detection, using nothing but timing and patience. Then Max II's sensors picked up something that made Sarah freeze. A familiar thermal signature on the 2nd floor, alone in a large room, waiting. "I have Katya's position," Sarah sub-vocalized into her comm. "2nd floor northeast corner. Command center confirmed. Roger that. Strike teams report ready status. 47 minutes until simultaneous assault. Keep her engaged." Sarah took a slow breath, then another. This was it. Everything came down to the next 4 hours. She checked her weapons one final time, felt Max II's steady presence beside her, and stepped into the corridor leading to the command center. The door was open, an invitation and a trap in equal measure. Sarah walked through it anyway. The room beyond was exactly as the blueprints had shown, large, high-ceilinged, with windows overlooking the mountains. But where there had once been Soviet communication equipment, now there were holographic displays showing a global map dotted with pulsing red nodes. Chimera, all 17 locations ready to activate with a single command. And in the center of it all, sitting at a sleek modern desk with her hands folded calmly, was Katya Volkov. She looked like her father. Same sharp features, same cold intelligence in her eyes. But where Victor had radiated brutal charisma, Katya projected something more controlled, more dangerous. She wore a simple black suit, no weapons visible, no obvious threats. Just a woman who knew she held the world hostage and was enjoying every second of it. "Agent 007, Katya said in perfect English with a slight Russian accent. "You're 3 minutes early. I appreciate punctuality." Sarah stood in the doorway, Max II at her side, both of them utterly still. "You wanted to talk, so talk." Katya's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Direct. I like that. My father said you were refreshingly straightforward in your methods. He respected that about you, even as you systematically destroyed his life's work. Your father was responsible for the deaths of innocents across 6 continents. He needed to be stopped." "Needed." Katya stood slowly, gracefully, like a dancer preparing for performance. Interesting word choice. Not deserved to die or was evil, just needed to be stopped. Very professional, very MI6. She walked to the windows, looking out at the mountains. Do you know what I learned watching you kill him that night in Prague? Sarah didn't respond, waiting. I learned that you weren't motivated by justice or patriotism or any of the noble ideals your service claims to uphold. You were motivated by duty, following orders, completing the mission. He was simply a target to be eliminated, and you eliminated him with the same emotional investment as taking out the trash. That's not true, Sarah said quietly. Your father was brilliant, charismatic, and utterly without conscience. He weaponized human suffering because it served his purposes. I didn't kill him casually. I killed him because no one else could. Katya turned, and for the first time real emotion flickered across her face. Anger, barely controlled. You killed him because you were good at killing, because British intelligence pointed you at him and you did what trained dogs do. You attacked on command. Through the neural link, Sarah felt Max II react to the word dog with subtle tension. She touched his head lightly, calming him. Is that why you brought me here? Sarah asked. To debate the morality of my service. Because if so, you've wasted a considerable amount of time and resources on a conversation that won't change anything. I brought you here, Katya said, her voice dropping to something colder, harder, to give you a choice. The same choice you gave my father that night. Surrender, or watch everything you love burn. She gestured at the holographic displays. Chimera is ready. One command from me and global infrastructure begins to collapse. Markets crash, defense systems fail, hospitals go dark, air traffic control ceases to function. Conservative estimates suggest 50 million casualties in the first 72 hours. Realistic estimates put it closer to 200 million once supply chains collapse and regional conflicts erupt over remaining resources. You'd murder 200 million people to avenge your father? Sarah asked, genuinely trying to understand. No, Katya said simply. I'd murder 200 million people to prove a point. That you, all of you in your secret services, with your licenses to kill and your classified operations, are nothing but state-sanctioned terrorists. That the only difference between my father and Agent 007 is that you have prettier letterhead. Sarah felt Catherine's voice in her ear. 38 minutes to strike. Keep her talking. So what's the choice? Sarah asked. Katya smiled, and it was terrible to see. You destroy yourself. Publicly. Completely. You go on every news network, every social media platform, every possible venue, and you confess. Every mission, every target, every classified operation you participated in over 30 years. You burn MI6 to the ground with your testimony, face whatever legal consequences follow, and spend the rest of your life in a cell, knowing you betrayed everything you believed in. She paused, letting it sink in. Do that, and I'll deactivate Chimera. Refuse, and I activate it right now. 200 million lives, Agent Collins, weighed against your precious secrecy and your service's reputation. What's your duty now? Sarah felt the weight of it, the impossible calculation. 30 years of operations compromised, Allied agents exposed, intelligence networks burned. It would cripple Western security for a generation. But 200 million lives. Through the neural link, she felt Max II's steady heartbeat, his absolute trust, his readiness to follow whatever decision she made. 35 minutes, Catherine whispered. Sarah looked at Katya Volkov and made her choice. All right, I'll do it. Katya blinked, clearly not expecting capitulation so quickly. Just like that? No negotiation? No attempt to stall? Just like that, Sarah said. You're right. 200 million lives outweigh my service record. I'll make the confession. But I need assurances, proof that you'll actually deactivate Chimera once I've completed my end. Katya studied her for a long moment, suspicion warring with satisfaction in her expression. You'll make the recording here. Now, I'll verify the content meets my requirements, then upload it to a dead man's switch. If I don't deactivate it within 72 hours, the recording goes live automatically. That gives you incentive to ensure I remain alive and free." "Acceptable," Sarah said. 29 minutes. Catherine's voice was tight with tension. Katya moved to her desk, pulling out a professional camera setup. "Begin with your name and service record. Then we'll move into specific operations." Sarah positioned herself in front of the camera, Max II sitting beside her, and began to speak. She recited her name, her service dates, her official designation as Agent 007. She described missions in vague terms, locations, years, general objectives, dancing along the edge of revelation without quite crossing it. And she talked and talked, drawing out each response, asking for clarification, requiring Katya to explain exactly what details she wanted, using every interview technique she'd learned over 3 decades to control the pace without appearing to control it. Katya grew frustrated. "You're stalling." "I'm being thorough," Sarah countered. "You want my full confession. That takes time, unless you'd prefer something rushed and unconvincing." Through her earpiece, 17 minutes. Katya paced, agitated now. "Tell me about Prague, about my father. I want details," so Sarah told her. Not everything, never everything, but enough. The surveillance operation, the infiltration, the confrontation on that rooftop, Victor's final words, his attempt to bargain, his fall into the river below. "You're lying," Katya said suddenly. "My father wouldn't have begged. He wouldn't have bargained." "He didn't beg," Sarah said quietly. "He offered me money, information, even recruitment into his organization. He was a pragmatist until the end. He understood I was just doing a job, and he respected that. But he also understood that some jobs, once started, have to be finished." 10 minutes, Catherine breathed. Katya moved to her computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "This is pointless. You're playing for time, which means MI6 is planning something, which means I should activate Chimera right now." "If you do that," Sarah said calmly, "you lose your leverage. I'm here. I'm cooperating. But if you activate Chimera, every intelligence service on Earth will hunt you forever. You'll never be safe, never be free. You'll die badly and alone in some black site no one admits exists." Katya's hand trembled over the keyboard. 5 minutes, Catherine said. "Strike teams report final positions." "Your father taught you to be smart," Sarah continued, "to think strategically. So think, what serves you better? Activating Chimera and guaranteeing your own destruction? Or accepting my confession, watching MI6 burn, and walking away with your vengeance complete and your life intact?" Katya's eyes were wild now, torn between rage and reason. "You killed him. You took everything from me." "I know," Sarah said softly, "and I'm sorry, truly. You were 16. You deserved better than to watch your father die. But he made choices that led him to that rooftop, just as you're making choices now that will define the rest of your life." 2 minutes. Katya's finger touched the keyboard. 1 key. That's all it would take. "Don't," Sarah said, "please. 60 seconds. Strike teams report green across all sites." Katya looked at Sarah, really looked at her, saw the grey hair, the lines of age, the weight of decades in her eyes. Saw not the monster she'd built up in her imagination, but just a woman who'd followed orders and lived with the consequences. 30 seconds! Katya took her hand off the keyboard. "Strike! Strike! Strike!" Catherine's voice was sharp with command. Around the world, 17 teams moved simultaneously. Breaching charges detonated. Cyber warfare specialists initiated attack protocols. Assets who'd been positioned for weeks pulled triggers, pressed buttons, executed perfectly coordinated operations that represented months of planning and billions in resources. In the command center, the holographic displays showed it all. Red nodes blinking, then changing to yellow as they came under attack. Katya spun toward her monitors, understanding flooding her face. "No! No!" She lunged for the keyboard, but Sarah was already moving. 65 years old, retired for 5 years, but muscle memory ran deeper than time. She crossed the distance in 3 strides, caught Katya's wrist and used the younger woman's momentum to send her sprawling across the desk. "Max, be waken!" "Guard!" Max 2 moved to block the door, his sensors alerting Sarah that syndicate operatives were responding, converging on their position. The facility's security protocols had detected the global strike against Chimera nodes and initiated full alert. Katya scrambled up, blood trickling from her split lip, and pulled a pistol from a hidden desk drawer. But Sarah was already there, hand clamping on the weapon, twisting it free with a technique that had been old when she learned it, and was now instinctive. They fought in the small space between desk and window, not the choreographed combat of movies, but the brutal, efficient violence of professionals who understood that hesitation meant death. Katya was younger, faster, but Sarah had experience, training that went bone deep, and the absolute certainty that she couldn't afford to lose. Sarah's elbow caught Katya in the solar plexus. The younger woman gasped, stumbling back. Sarah pressed the advantage, a palm strike to the sternum that sent Katya crashing into the holographic display. It shattered in a shower of sparks and dying light. On the monitors behind them, the last Chimera node turned from yellow to green. Neutralized. All 17 sites secured. Chimera was dead. Katya saw it too. Saw her 6 years of work, her revenge, her purpose, all of it gone in minutes. Something broke in her expression, a fundamental comprehension that she'd lost everything her father had built, just as Sarah had destroyed him. "It's over," Sarah said, breathing hard. "Stand down, Katya. There's no more leverage, no more hostages, just you and me and choices." Katya laughed, a broken sound. "Choices. That's what you think this is about?" She moved suddenly, not toward Sarah but toward the window. "My father chose death over capture. I choose the same." She ran. "No!" Sarah lunged forward, but Katya was already at the window, already throwing herself through it in a shower of breaking glass. Sarah reached the shattered opening, in time to see Katya fall, her body growing smaller as it plummeted toward the rocks 3 stories below. She hit with an impact that was final and terrible, her form going still against the unforgiving stone. The facility's alarms were screaming now. Max II's sensors showed syndicate operatives less than 30 seconds from their position. Catherine's voice filled Sarah's ear, professional despite the circumstances. "Collins, you're compromised. Extraction team is inbound, 90 seconds out. Rooftop LZ. Move now." Sarah tore herself away from the window. "Max, come! Come!" They burst from the command center into a corridor filled with armed hostiles. Sarah fired on the move, trusting Max 2's sensors to guide her aim. The Walther barked 3 times, 3 clean shots, 3 targets down. Max 2's tactical vest deployed a flashbang that bought them precious seconds. Up a stairwell, taking steps 3 at a time despite her body's protests. Behind them, footsteps and shouts. A bullet spanged off the metal railing inches from Sarah's head. She returned fire without breaking stride, heard someone scream, through a door marked "Roof Access" in Cyrillic letters. The Georgian night was cold and clear, stars brilliant above the mountains. In the distance, the helicopter was incoming, its searchlight cutting through the darkness. Sarah ran toward the designated LZ, Max II keeping pace. Behind them, the door burst open. More hostiles fanning out, raising weapons. The helicopter's door gunner opened up, suppressive fire that forced the syndicate operatives to dive for cover. The aircraft touched down just long enough for Sarah and Max II to throw themselves inside. Then it was lifting, banking hard, rotor wash scattering debris across the rooftop. Sarah lay on the helicopter floor, chest heaving, Max II pressed against her side. Through the neural link, she felt his elevated heart rate slowly calming, matching her own as adrenaline faded. "Mission complete," she gasped into her comm. "Chimera is neutralized. Katya Volkov is dead." Catherine's response was tinged with relief. "Confirmed. All 17 nodes are secure." "You did it, Sarah. You saved them all." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of it. 200 million people who would wake up tomorrow never knowing how close they'd come to dying. That was the nature of this work. Victory was invisible, Success meant nothing happened. The helicopter banked toward the Georgian border, towards safety and debriefing and the 1,000 details that would follow. Sarah stroked Max Latoon's head, finding comfort in the simple act. "Good boy," she whispered. "You did so well." Through the neural link, she felt his contentment, his satisfaction at a job completed. It reminded her so much of the original Max that tears stung her eyes. Below, the KGB facility grew smaller, disappearing into the vast darkness of the Caucasus Mountains. Somewhere in that complex, emergency services would eventually find Katya Volkov's body. The official story would be an industrial accident, a tragic fall. The truth would be classified, buried, forgotten, just another ghost in a world full of them. Agent 007's last mission was complete. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in her kitchen in Decatur, watching rain streak down the windows while coffee brewed on the counter. The morning news played softly on the tablet propped against the backsplash, reporters discussing a minor earthquake in Georgia, the country, not the state, and the unfortunate collapse of an abandoned industrial facility in the mountains. No casualties reported, a footnote in the day's events, already forgotten by most viewers before they finished their breakfast. Sarah knew better. Knew that beneath that sanitized report lay the systematic erasure of evidence, the removal of bodies, the complete sterilization of a site that had briefly held the fate of the world in balance. MI6 was efficient at cleanup. She'd helped them perfect those techniques over 3 decades. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Tom Hendricks. Event tonight, 7 p.m. Riverside Convention Center. Same place as last time. Hope you'll come. We owe you an apology. A proper one." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. The charity event. They were holding another one, as if the previous gathering hadn't ended in gunfire and international espionage. But then, for most of the attendees, that was exactly what had happened. The official story, fed to them by federal agents during debriefing, was a terrorist threat that had been neutralized before it could materialize. Sarah Collins had been present, yes, but only as a bystander. The real heroes were the unnamed agents who'd prevented the attack. Another cover-up, another truth buried. She typed a response. "I'll think about it." Max the Toon padded into the kitchen, his claws clicking softly on the tile floor. He'd been living with her for 2 weeks now, officially retired from MI6 service and gifted to her as recognition for her final mission. The neural interface had been removed. That technology was too classified to remain in civilian hands, but the bond between them remained strong. He looked up at her with those intelligent eyes, and Sarah felt the familiar pang of connection that transcended words. "Hungry?" she asked. His tail wagged once. She filled his bowl with the specialized food MI6 had provided, formulated for working dogs, though Max the Two's working days were behind him now. He ate with the same focused intensity he brought to everything, while Sarah finally poured her coffee and settled at the kitchen table. The past 3 weeks had been a blur of debriefings, medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and paperwork. So much paperwork. MI6 wanted to ensure she was physically and mentally sound after the mission. They'd offered her reinstatement, full active duty, with a promotion and a corner office if she wanted it. She'd declined. Again. Some people were meant for the field until age made it impossible. Sarah had discovered she wasn't one of them. The mission in Tbilisi had proven she still had the skills, the instincts, the capacity for violence when necessary. But it had also reminded her of the cost, the weight of taking a life, even one like Katya Volkov's, the knowledge that she'd spent 30 years living in shadows, existing in gaps between official records, serving a purpose that no one could acknowledge. She was tired, not physically. The doctors had confirmed she was in remarkable shape for 65, but tired in her soul, in the places that never healed no matter how much time passed. Her tablet chimed with an incoming video call. Catherine Ashford's face appeared, professional as always, though there was a warmth in her expression that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. "Agent Collins, how are you settling back in?" Director Ashford, I'm fine. Enjoying the quiet. Catherine smiled. I'm sure you are. I wanted to inform you that the Prime Minister has approved your commendation. It'll be classified, naturally, but your service record will reflect that you prevented a catastrophic loss of life during your final operation. That matters, Sarah, even if the public never knows. Thank you. There's something else. Catherine's tone shifted slightly, becoming more careful. We've been analyzing the intelligence recovered from the Tbilisi facility. Katya Volkov kept extensive records, her father's original operations, the syndicate's complete organizational structure, contacts and assets across 40 countries. It's the most comprehensive intelligence coup we've had in 20 years. Sarah waited, sensing there was more. In those records, we found something about you, something Katya had been investigating. Catherine pulled up a file on her screen. Did you know that Viktor Volkov had a son? Older than Katya by 15 years. He disappeared after Viktor's death in Prague. We assumed he'd fled the organization, gone to ground, maybe even died in the chaos that followed. Sarah's coffee went cold in her hands. But he didn't. No, his name is Alexei Volkov, and according to Katya's notes, he's been building his own operation, separate from the syndicate, focused on a single objective: finding and killing the agent who murdered his father. Catherine paused. Finding and killing you, Sarah. The rain against the windows seemed louder suddenly. Max Thurn had finished eating and now sat at Sarah's feet, sensing her tension. How credible is the threat? Very. Alexei is patient, methodical, and unlike his father and sister, he's not interested in grand gestures or making statements. He just wants revenge, and he's willing to wait years to get it. We've put surveillance on your property, increased monitoring, but if he's as good as his father, he'll find a way. Sarah finished the thought. How long do I have? Impossible to say. Could be months, could be years, could be never if we locate him first. But I thought you deserved to know. Catherine leaned closer to her camera. We can offer protection. Full detail, safe house, new identity if necessary. Sarah looked around her kitchen, at the modest home she'd built for herself, at Max too, who'd already been through too much in his young life, at the quiet, peaceful existence she'd carved out after decades of violence. No, she said quietly, no safe house, no detail. If Alexei Volkov wants to find me, he'll find me regardless, and I won't spend whatever time I have left looking over my shoulder, living in fear. I've earned better than that. Catherine looked like she wanted to argue, but ultimately nodded. I understand, but Sarah, if anything happens, if you see anything suspicious, I'll call. I promise. They spoke for a few more minutes about administrative details, about the official closure of her service record, about the pension increase that reflected her final mission's success, professional matters, handled professionally. Then Catherine signed off, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and her coffee and the rain. She sat there for a long time, processing the information. Alexei Volkov, another ghost from her past, another consequence of the choices she'd made in service to her country and her duty. Part of her felt the familiar calculations starting: threat assessment, defensive measures, contingency planning. But another part, a newer part, born from 5 years of retirement and 3 weeks of reflection, simply felt tired. Tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of living in the shadows. By 6:30 that evening, Sarah had made her decision. She dressed carefully, not in tactical gear or the conservative suits she'd worn for official business, but in a simple blue dress that she'd bought 2 years ago and never worn. She even applied light makeup, something she hadn't done since the night of that first charity event. Max II watched her preparations with interest, his tail wagging when she attached his service vest, not the tactical one from MI6, but a simple vest identifying him as a working dog. She'd take him with her. Partners stayed together. The drive to the Riverside Convention Center felt longer than she remembered. Atlanta traffic was its usual nightmare, but Sarah didn't mind. She used the time to think, to prepare, to decide what she would say. The parking lot was full when she arrived. Through the windows, she could see the same crowd of retired officers, the same familiar faces, gathered in the same ballroom where everything had changed 3 weeks ago. The facility had been repaired quickly, bullet holes patched, broken glass replaced, security systems upgraded, as if that night had never happened. Sarah sat in her car for a moment. Max stuck beside her, both of them looking at the building. "Ready?" she asked him. His tail thumped against the seat. They walked in together. The effect was immediate and profound. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Someone dropped a glass, the sound of shattering crystal sharp in the sudden silence. Sarah kept walking, Max the two at her side, moving through the crowd toward the same table where she'd sat 3 weeks ago. Tom Hendricks stood up, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. "Sarah, we didn't think you'd come. You invited me," Sarah said simply. It seemed rude to decline. Martha Yates was crying before Sarah even reached the table. "We're so sorry. God, we're so sorry. The things we said, the way we laughed." "It's all right, Martha. It's not all right." Raymond Chen's voice was rough with emotion. "We mocked you. We treated you like you were losing your mind. And the whole time you'd been out there saving people, being a hero, and we just—" He couldn't finish. None of them could. They stood around the table. Tom, Martha, Raymond, Lisa, and a dozen others who'd been present that night, all of them looking at Sarah with expressions ranging from shame to awe to something like fear. Sarah pulled out a chair and sat down. Max the second settled at her feet, perfectly calm despite the attention. "May I tell you something?" They nodded, unable to speak. "For 30 years, I did work that can never be acknowledged. I went places that aren't on maps. I did things that can't be discussed. I saved lives that will never know they were in danger. And through all of it, I was alone. Even with partners, even with teams, there was a fundamental isolation in knowing that my entire existence was classified." She paused, looking at each of them in turn. "When I retired, I thought I wanted recognition. I thought I wanted people to know, to understand what I'd done. That's why I told you the truth that night. Not to brag or to prove anything, but because I wanted just once to exist in the world as myself, as the person I actually am, not the cover story or the legend or the ghost." Tom sat down heavily. "And we laughed at you." "You did," Sarah agreed. "And I don't blame you for that. It was an absurd claim. An old woman saying she was James Bond. Of course you laughed. It was the rational response." "But it was true," Lisa said softly. "It was all true, yes. But here's what I've learned in the 3 weeks since that night. Truth doesn't require belief to remain true. I spent 30 years as Agent 07, regardless of whether anyone here acknowledges it. I saved those lives regardless of whether they sent thank you cards. The work happened, the service mattered. Your belief or disbelief doesn't change that." Martha wiped her eyes. "Then why come back? Why face us again?" Sarah smiled, and it was genuine. "Because you invited me. Because despite everything, we share something real. Years of service, years of trying to make the world a little safer, a little better. You did it with badges and patrol cars and public recognition. I did it with classified clearances and false identities and deniability. But we were all trying to do the same thing, protect people who couldn't protect themselves." She reached down to stroke Max Attun's head. "And because I've spent enough time being angry about not being believed, I'd rather spend whatever time I have left just living, being Sarah Collins, retired K-9 officer, being someone who can sit at a table with colleagues and share a meal without calculating threats or planning operations." The tension in the group began to ease, just slightly. Tom cleared his throat. "The federal agents who debriefed us said you were present during a terrorist incident, that you helped prevent an attack. They made it sound like you were just there. But that wasn't true, was it?" Sarah considered her response carefully. "I can't discuss the specifics, but I can tell you that whatever the official story is, it's designed to protect both the innocent and the guilty. Some truths are too dangerous to be widely known." Raymond leaned forward. "Did you really work with a dog partner in MI6? Or was Max just your K9 here in Atlanta? Both, Sarah said. The original Max was my partner in Atlanta for 7 years. When MI6 recruited me, he came with me. He served for another 23 years in roles that can't be discussed. He died in the line of duty 6 years ago. She gestured to Max Stu. This is his great-great-grandson, Max Kuhn. He's retired now too. Lisa reached out tentatively, letting Max Stu sniff her hand. Can I pet him? He'd like that. As Lisa gently scratched Max Stu's ears, something shifted in the atmosphere. The guilt and shame that had filled the space began to transform into something else. Not quite forgiveness, that would take time, but acceptance, understanding, a recognition that they were all human, all fallible, all doing their best with incomplete information. More people approached the table, drawn by curiosity and remorse in equal measure. They asked questions, carefully and respectfully now. Sarah answered what she could, deflected what she couldn't, and found herself actually enjoying the conversation. These were good people who'd made a mistake. She'd made plenty of mistakes herself over the years. Who was she to hold a grudge? The evening wore on. Someone brought Sarah food from the buffet. Someone else made sure her water glass stayed full. They treated her not as a celebrity or a curiosity, but as one of their own, a fellow officer who'd served with distinction and earned her rest. Around 9 o'clock, the event's organizer approached the microphone at the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." The crowd quieted. Sarah felt a moment of apprehension, wondering if she was about to be put on display. 3 weeks ago, this event was interrupted by an incident that many of you witnessed. Federal authorities have assured us that the threat was neutralized and there is no ongoing danger. However, in the course of that incident, we learned that one of our own, someone we all thought we knew, has actually led a life of extraordinary service that few of us could imagine. Sarah started to stand, intending to head this off, but Tom gently touched her arm. Let him finish. Sarah Collins, the organizer continued, served with our K9 unit for 7 years before transitioning to work with British intelligence. While the specifics of her service remain classified, we have been informed by federal authorities that she prevented a significant threat to public safety just 3 weeks ago, continuing a career of distinguished service that has spanned more than 30 years. The room erupted in applause. Sarah sat frozen, unsure how to react. This wasn't what she'd wanted. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd spent her career avoiding. We'd like to present Sarah with a token of our appreciation and our respect, the organizer said. If she'll come forward, please. Tom stood, offering his hand to help her up. Go on. You've earned this. Sarah walked to the front of the room, Max the camera at her side, feeling every eye on her. The organizer handed her a plaque, simple, elegant, with her name and dates of service engraved on polished wood. Below that, a single line, "For service above and beyond." "We can't give you the recognition you deserve," the organizer said quietly, so only she could hear. "We can't even fully understand what you've done, but we can say thank you. On behalf of everyone you've protected, everyone you've saved, thank you for your service." Sarah took the plaque with hands that trembled slightly. She looked out at the crowd, at faces that had laughed at her 3 weeks ago and were now applauding with genuine respect and gratitude, at Tom and Martha and Raymond and Lisa, all of them smiling through tears. "Thank you," Sarah said into the microphone, her voice stronger than she felt. "Thank you for this, and for the invitation tonight. I spent 30 years being someone I couldn't talk about. It means more than I can express to finally be seen, to be acknowledged, even if the specifics must remain secret. The fact that you know, that you believe, that's a gift." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "I'm not James Bond. I'm not a superhero or a legend. I'm just a woman who tried to do her job as best she could with the help of the best partners anyone could ask for." She looked down at Max Thest. "We serve because someone has to. We sacrifice because the alternative is unacceptable. And we do it knowing that the world will never fully understand or appreciate what we've given. But tonight, standing here, I feel appreciated. I feel understood. And that's enough. More than enough. She raised the plaque slightly. Thank you, all of you. The applause intensified. People stood, a standing ovation that felt both overwhelming and profoundly moving. Sarah returned to her table, accepting handshakes and thanks along the way, feeling something inside her chest loosen, a tension she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and connections. People shared their own stories, moments when they'd made a difference, saved a life, stopped a crime. Sarah listened and contributed, no longer the ghost in the corner, but a full participant in the community she'd briefly been part of all those years ago. As midnight approached and the crowd began to thin, Tom walked her to her car. "Sarah," he said, his voice serious, "I need you to know something. That night, when I laughed, it's going to haunt me for the rest of my life." "Don't let it," Sarah said gently. "You didn't know. You reacted the way any reasonable person would. I don't hold it against you, but I should have known, should have seen something in you, some sign that you were more than you appeared." Sarah smiled. "Tom, if you'd seen that, I would have been terrible at my job. The whole point was to appear ordinary. You saw exactly what I wanted you to see. That's not your failure, that's my success." He nodded, not quite accepting it, but understanding. "Will we see you again at the next event?" Sarah looked up at the night sky, at stars dulled by Atlanta's light pollution, but still visible if you knew where to look. "Maybe. I'm learning to live a normal life, or as normal as possible when you've been what I've been. It's an adjustment. Well, whenever you're ready, we'll be here. And Sarah, we believe you now, about everything." She drove home through quiet streets, Max the two sleeping peacefully in the passenger seat, the plaque resting on the back seat. The house was dark when she arrived, welcoming in its familiarity. She let Max the two out in the backyard, watched him explore the perimeter one last time before bed, old habits from his training days, and then they both went inside. Sarah placed the plaque on the mantel, next to a framed photograph that only a few people knew existed. It showed a younger Sarah, barely 33, in tactical gear and covered in mud, kneeling beside the original Max after a successful operation in some unnamed location. Both of them were smiling, tired but triumphant, partners in every sense of the word. "He'd be proud of you," Sarah said to Max Thu, who'd come to stand beside her. "Proud of both of us." Max Thu's tail wagged slowly. The next morning, Sarah woke early and made her decision. She got dressed in comfortable clothes, leashed Max the tone, and drove to a cemetery on the outskirts of Atlanta. She'd only been here once before, 6 years ago, when Max had been laid to rest in a special section reserved for working dogs who'd served with distinction. The grave was simple, a small headstone with his name, his years of service, and the MI6 insignia, visible only to those who knew to look for it. Someone, probably Catherine Ashford or one of her people, had maintained the site. The grass was trimmed, the stone clean. Sarah knelt beside the grave, Max the said sitting at attention beside her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the item she'd carried with her since retirement. Her 007 insignia, the small pin that designated her role and authority, the symbol of everything she'd been. She'd thought about what to do with it for 5 years. Keeping it felt wrong. She wasn't that person anymore. Destroying it felt disrespectful to the service she'd given. But leaving it here, with the partner who'd made that service possible, felt right. "Hey, Max," she said softly. "Sorry it's been so long. Things have been complicated." The morning breeze rustled through the trees. Birds sang their territorial songs. The world went on, indifferent and eternal. I completed one last mission, just like old times. There was a threat, and they needed someone who understood how to handle it. So I went, and I succeeded. She smiled. Max Thu here was with me. Your great-great-grandson. He's got your instincts, your courage. You'd like him. She placed the insignia on the headstone, the metal catching the morning light. I'm leaving this with you, not because I'm ashamed of what we did, but because I'm finally ready to let it go, to be just Sarah again, just a woman who once had an extraordinary career and is now learning to live an ordinary life. Max II shifted slightly, leaning against her leg. Sarah wrapped her arm around him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for the saves, for the loyalty, for being the best partner anyone could ask for. I hope wherever you are, you're chasing rabbits and getting all the treats and knowing that you mattered, that you made a difference." She stayed there for a long time, kneeling in the grass beside her old friend's grave, while the sun climbed higher and the world woke around her. When she finally stood, her knees protested, reminding her of her age and her limitations. But as she walked back to her car, Max II at her side, Sarah Collins felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of secrets, of service, of being someone she couldn't acknowledge, all of it fell away like shed skin. She was 65 years old. She'd saved the world more times than most people would believe. She'd been laughed at and dismissed and then vindicated. She'd completed one final mission and proven that age was just a number when experience and determination came into play. And now, finally, she could rest. The drive home was peaceful. Sarah stopped for coffee and a pastry, treating herself to small pleasures that had once seemed frivolous when measured against international crises and life-or-death operations. She stopped at a park and threw a ball for Max II, watching him run with the pure joy that only dogs seemed capable of, uncomplicated by existential worries or past regrets. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from Catherine Ashford. "Alexei Volkov, located in Prague. Taken into custody this morning. Threat neutralized. You're clear." Sarah read the message 3 times, feeling relief wash over her. She typed back, "Thank you for everything." Catherine's response was immediate. "Thank you, Agent Collins. The service you've given will never be forgotten, even if it can never be fully acknowledged. Live well. You've earned it." Sarah set the phone down and looked around her modest home, at the comfortable furniture and the garden visible through the back windows, at Max II sleeping peacefully in a patch of sunlight, at the plaque on the mantel, and the life she'd built from the ashes of her old identity. She'd been Agent 007. She'd carried that designation with honor and distinction. She'd saved lives and prevented catastrophes and done things that would remain classified long after she was gone. But now she was simply Sarah Collins, retired, at peace, finally, truly free. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.